So back in August of 2016, I went to California and I also visited Coast Gym USA in Southern California. When I was there, I met the crew and I hand selected a couple different fish that I wanted to bring home. I did a video for you guys where I unboxed the fish that I previously selected from California. Not only unboxed the fish, but I actually went ahead and set the 75-gallon up and I introduced the fish into the aquarium. But that was 5 months ago, and I've rarely shown you that tank since. So today, I'm actually doing the first water change on that aquarium. I know, 5 months and big goldfish, no water changes? Well, I'm going to tell you guys on how I've done that. So to start this off, let's talk about why we perform water changes. In our community, there's going to be a lot of people telling you their own opinion. You need to learn this firsthand. If I could give you any advice to my channel, this is my #1 saying and I stand by it. Learn your system, not the hobby. Methods that work for other people might not work for you. There are going to be people out there saying that, hey, you need to religiously perform a water change. You need to do 100% water change every day on those discus. There's going to be people out there in fresh and even salt water saying, I haven't done a water change 5 years. My fish are still growing, everything seems fine, but you're not seeing the full aspect of their system. They're coming in front of a camera or getting on a blog saying, hey, I don't do water changes, but what else are you doing to your system? Are you replenishing those nutrients in salt water through means of dosing, such as bionic? In fresh water, are you adding those nutrients back to your planet aquarium? We don't know the full spectrum of it. So just because someone is saying that something might work for them doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. But the #1 reason people perform water changes is to remove the nitrogenous waste in the water column. Now that's going to be everywhere. It's going to be in your sand, it's going to be in your water column, and it's even going to be in your filters. This builds up, and nitrogenous waste is going to be anywhere from ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. There's different forms of those. Ammonia can be toxic and non-toxic. In lower pHs, it's going to become kind of locked up. There's also multiple forms of phosphorus in your water tank. There's going to be toxic forms and non-toxic forms. The bottom line is we need to remove these things, but we're not actually removing it in full. We're diluting it. Another good point of performing water changes is the removal of decomposing waste, organic waste in the water column. If you watched my last video, I'll put it somewhere here on screen and in the description below. I talked about how basically the organics in the water column feed the nitrogen cycle. And in the end, you're going to have all that build up. And salt water is removed through things like protein skimmers and refugiums. But at the same time, if that's not present, and even with the skimmer, you're still going to have organic waste in the water column. That can be anywhere from uneaten food, fish waste, dead snails, dead shrimp, even a dead fish. Anything that's organic in the water column is going to add to the decomposing organic waste in your system. It's best to remove that. Decaying material can also lower the Tweety Bird. Decaying Tweety Bird. I'm trying to do a video. Decaying organics can also lower your pH. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can lead to the lowering steadily of your pH. Decaying waste in your substrate can be lethal. Not all the time, so don't panic, but it's good to get in the habit of cleaning your substrate. Another point is for aesthetics. That's water clarity. When you perform a water change, your water is going to become much clearer. Now, after performing the water change, while you're filling your aquarium up, you're going to say, man, it's cloudier now than ever. That's because things just got stirred up. It might look bad, but you don't see in a few hours the filter's going to catch up. Things are going to settle down into the substrate, and the water is going to be clearer now than ever. This is another really good point on performing water changes. That is the replenishing of trace elements, minerals, vitamins. When you have an aquarium that's constantly running, your corals, your plants, even your fish are absorbing all these nutrients such as trace elements, minerals, and even vitamins. Eventually, your water column gets depleted of this. Now, some of them will replenish naturally through certain means if your aquarium is set up that way. It's a little complicated though. But for the most part, they're not coming back if they're not replenished manually. Now, people that don't perform water changes, they can dose. But nothing really beats a true water change. It's a healthy habit, it's good husbandry, you need to get in the habit of it. Personally, in the past, I've been on the road of no water changes and water changes. I had to find out what worked for me, and not only me, but each of my aquariums. I highly suggest you watch this series in order. Go back and watch the video where I talk about water out of your tap. This is also going to play in your water changes. So, let's talk about how I do my water changes, and that ties directly in what I mean about the water coming out of your tap. So early on in my aquarium years, I found out that maybe there's something wrong with my well water. Now this is going to vary. You might have treated water, you might have shared water, artesian well, shallow well, whatever the means of your water source is, more than likely it's going to be different. Now just because your neighbor keeps a healthy aquarium, don't expect to have the same results as him. Don't expect to have the same water quality coming out of your tap. It might be fed from the same pocket of water in the ground, but that doesn't mean that it's going to have the same results. I have a shallow well, so when it rains really heavy and for a long period of time, the water gets very cloudy. That's all the dirt and sand getting into my water column in the ground. It's really harmless, but it just makes the aquariums cloudy. So when I'm trying to improve my water clarity by doing a water change, I'm actually making it much worse. Once again, these will settle down into the substrate and be collected by the filter, but I want water clarity now, not 5 days from now. But at the same time, I have a shallow well. With artesian wells that are deeper, you don't really run into this problem because they're deep. There's lower oxygen levels. With my shallow well, I run into the problem of having nitrates in my water column, and they are always present. In my plant aquariums, I noticed when I did a water change that the plants would pearl, they would grow overnight, but the fish would be panting because I set the aquariums up to the point where it would be forgiving. I knew life would get me off hands with my aquariums, so I let nature take care of my tanks. My plant tank has a deep dirt bed. You can throw anything you want at that tank, and I'm positive that substrate will be forgiving. The live plants and the beneficial bacteria in the substrate eventually absorb the nitrates overnight. But for the few hours that the aquarium was full of nitrates, the fish are constantly gasping. In the end, my water changes were actually doing more harm for my fish than good. So I had to find a way around this. And I came across a great idea. Prime. What does Prime do? Prime detoxifies nitrites, ammonia, into a less toxic form for a certain amount of hours. I think it was 8 hours or something along those lines. Well, that's more than enough time to allow my beneficial bacteria to catch up. So when I do water changes now, I introduce Prime into my aquariums before adding new water into my tanks. That way the Prime can detoxify my aquarium and ensure my fish don't go through a stressful transition. One other mistake I see a lot of people making is when they do a water change, they put a pump in their system, or they turn a ball valve, or they just siphon water from the water column. Now once again, if you have something along the lines of a bare bottom system where there's not much waste collecting on the bottom, or you have a deep substrate where it takes the nitrates and convert it into a nitrogen gas released into the atmosphere, that's not really going to be a problem. But if you have a shallow sand bed or substrate bed that has no means of turning nitrates into nitrogen gas, you really want to practice tank husbandry. You want to take that siphon and go down into the substrate and manually remove as much organic buildup as you can. If this is not performed on a regular basis, eventually this can be very catastrophic. A lot of people tend to forget the basics, and what I mean by that is what I said earlier in the video. People stick a pump in the aquarium, or they just take a siphon and just suck up the water out of the water column. They're really not removing the waste where it settles. And with goldfish, it's actually a bonus. The goldfish are always on the bottom looking for food. If you're not careful, you can very well easily overfeed your goldfish because they won't stop eating. But with sand as a substrate, this is a bonus. While they're always on the bottom grazing for food and looking for something to snatch up, they're actually turning over my substrate, meaning that all the dead bacteria that's old, kind of like a moving bed filter, it's getting rotated, and all the organics that are trapped in the substrate get pushed right back into the water column, and then my hang on the back filters suck it in and remove it from my water column. So I covered on how I manually do water changes on my 75-gallon Gold Fish Aquarium. Now, this could be easier. I could do several things to make it easier upon myself, but I think what I've got going on works for me, and I don't mind doing the work with the bucket. Sometimes I like to go a little old school. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't make things complicated if you don't have to. But what I didn't cover was the fact that, what about all that pollutant buildup over the last 5 months? Where did that go? If you guys are familiar with aquaponics, you know plants absorb fish waste. And the same thing applies to live aquarium plants that are underwater. Goldfish have a huge bioload. And when they excrete their waste, it's a lot of waste. So when I first set this tank up, I really didn't have a desire for it to have a theme. I kind of wanted to go bare bottom or sand. Now, the sand I was debating on was not decided until I watched John with KG Tropical's video where he was renovating his 125-gallon discus tank. He purchased pool filter sand from a Walmart in Dahlgren, Virginia. Now, that Walmart's about 2-3 years old now, and prior to that, the closest pool filter sand was an hour-and-a-half drive in either direction for me. I live out in the sticks. I love it. It's a double-edged sword. There's nothing around here, but at least you got peace and quiet. Anyways, back to topic. Once I found out this Walmart that's 45 minutes roughly away from me carried pool filter sand, well, I jumped in my truck and scooted my little butt down the road. I grabbed a couple bags of pool filter sand, came back, I mixed it with aragonite sand for salt water. That way I could buffer my pH to get a proper reading for goldfish so they could be comfortable. And I put the sand in there, and I thought something was missing, so I decided to go ahead and plant the aquarium. With the benefits of plants, they're going to absorb all that waste, and now I gave their roots a structure, but I also had to decide what plants to get. Did I really want to go for a theme and a really good-looking aquascape when a goldfish might actually uproot everything and eat some plants? No, I don't want to get into that. So what I decided to do was I looked in my stock tanks and I said, hey, I have a lot of crypts. So I got Crypt undulata, Crypt parva, Crypt wendetti, green, bronze, red, Crypt spiralis, a whole bunch of different species of crypts, and I threw them in there. This aquascape was not pre-planned. It was just pretty much grab a plant and make it look good, and don't spend any time on it, and I didn't. And what I threw together was adequate. My goal was to leave the tank open for swimming room, and at the same time have it look decent. You know, don't make an art piece out of it, but make it look good. If you ever test the water in this aquarium, you're not going to find any nitrates, even with these big goldfish. That's because the plants are absorbing the nutrients. So all in all, I took methods from my 125-gallon and I transferred it over to this goldfish tank, and I made some modifications that it could be appropriate for the goldfish. I hope you guys like this video, and stay tuned for next week's video. I'm going to bring brand new content to you guys, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Comment, rate, and subscribe. I'll see you next week. I've been Wayne with Wayne's Fish World. Later.